Okay, so I'd like to continue the same theme as was last time I spoke 2 weeks ago. And I use the term samsara often in here, so I'd like to just make sure that everybody understands the way I'm using it, which is a self-made world, a world of self-absorption. And it's not a place, it's actually us. It's how we look at reality through our small mind. Okay. If you have questions, please feel free to ask at any time. I've been talking about space, details, and joy. So today I'd want to continue that with an emphasis on details. We're too involved in thoughts and emotions to look for happiness. A short-lived pleasure emotion. We confuse happiness with joy, and joy comes from the ground of being up, which permeates everything and does not depend on outside circumstances. So a joyful state of mind is not something we can manipulate into being. It's more like arranging blocks. Well, it's not like arranging blocks among our many moods. A calm state of mind reveals joy not by things, but by the absence of things. It's not a special focus of mind, but appears when we stop clinging to form. You could say that we recognize joy as always being there when we experience it. It's pervasive and spacious rather than one-pointed, and it's always present. It's usually unnoticed because we have too much internal noise. To ground oneself, we bring awareness back to body and mind, but unnoticed. And we do this in Zazen. To the immediate self, we sit for a while, and then we go beyond that immediate self to look at our complete body and mind self, which is the world beyond our small mind. So joy is connected to everything. Perception is beyond the small self, and it awakens us to the boundlessness of our reality. In meditation, we observe body, mind, and emotions and stop clinging to any one thought. We endure difficulties and let them pass. We create spaciousness sitting in the zendo or in meditation at home. But a way to really slow down and experience all that we're capable of is to live in our real and complete body as much as possible. So look around. There's a multitude of you. The walls, the floors, the windows, the smell of food, the wind, the sound of the street, voices, grass, trees, arguments, flowers, birds, trash, garbage, cats, dogs, squirrels, and insects. And even more, there are spouses, children, parents, friends, relatives, strangers, everything we look upon and feel comforted by, threatened by, angered by, worried by, or helped by is our one true self, as we are every moment. It's very easy to move among things and yet never realize how intimate it all is with us. Everything we look upon is blessed, wrote William Butler Yeats in his poem called Dialogue of Soul and Self. You could also say, everything we look upon is Buddha nature, expressed through self-nature. With all of the individual creativity each one is capable of bringing forth from body, speech, and mind. We've created our whole world both in ignorance and in wisdom. All of it is there to cherish and to learn to love ourselves fully, unconditionally, and we can savor our individuality in both foolishness and in clarity. We can learn how to skillfully refrain from cruel or violent behavior, We can relish the richness of our life in changeable us expressed everywhere, every moment. We wonder how we can pay attention to our words and actions throughout the busy days and live with a life full of interruptions and noise. Focusing on ourselves makes us self-conscious, and we can't live long like that. It's too unnatural. But we can do what is natural for us. That is, we can just pay attention to what we are doing in the moment. With the sight of things, the taste of things, the smell of things, the sounds of things, the touch of things, and a perception that flows with everything we engage in. That's the beginning of ourselves, to be found in all the tiniest details of our existence as we look out at all that our body, speech, and mind have created. The sound of conversations, loud music, noisy birds, traffic, we created it all. We must let it all in if we want to know ourselves intimately. In other words, if we want to know how to love others and to know our world as ourselves, we must welcome it all. Your true body is the world as it is. It doesn't need editing for the sad parts. Everything doesn't need to be fixed. The bright and good parts don't need our attachment, and the horrific parts are neither forgivable nor unforgivable, and don't need to be clung to, never to be forgotten. We can smile in bright times and grieve in difficult times. We can also grieve in bright times and smile in dreadful times. We cannot continue to cling to either without disrupting the flow of the times. The world can pass as it does, and we can watch to learn and participate in its movement. We can help and move with it as we wish. We can grieve, laugh, smile, and weep over the happenings around us. We can help in any way that works for us. We cannot expect everyone to feel and behave in the same way. If you're very sad and you meet a happy person with a smile, be glad for the remembrance of smiles and joy and welcome it. We can swim in the water as we find it, in suffering, in joy, relaxing, with full body and mind, or sit on the beach and just watch. The water may be threatening, cold, or a pleasure to be in. How we swim in it is up to us, depending on how much effort we put into it, but it still always comes down to the same beach and warm sand in the end. We all face old age and death, and we all will experience much that life has to give us. How we live is our choice alone, whether in the midst of turmoil or not. We can develop a calm and empathetic mind even in the midst of terrible things. We must still wake up to the world or be drawn by the flow of life in ignorance and find ourselves repeating the same difficulties over and over. We may want to experience a joyful life or an energetic life. We may want to do nothing at all. We may want to achieve or get all the flowers we can, or just roll in the sun. It all comes down to the same thing in the end. We grow old and die. Whether we strive or not, whether we succeed or not, whether we want a long run or a short one, we come in with who we are and we leave with who we are and what we have done to ourselves with life. We can't look to the past for our satisfactions, but only to the present to assess who we are. Past history will count for nothing when you look at your present self. If you want to fix the world, solve difficult dilemmas of social injustice, fight for right against wrong, you should do it any way you find helpful. Just know that everything fixed will unfix in time. Innocence and guilt, sorrow and suffering will still be there to face. What you consider worthy, you should do in social work, or in contemplation, or in the nitty-gritty confusion of life. No matter what you do, the world of samsara will be present to awaken you to your inner condition. No matter what you do, it will help you to wake up. It doesn't matter what you choose, just do it wholeheartedly so that the changes you bring about in yourself you may want to be glad about when you reach the end of your life. We didn't enter into samsara to make a beautiful and good world, but to learn to master ourselves, body, speech, and mind, according to each one's needs. The world of samsara will always be a problem for us, for all those who want to free themselves from self-tyranny. And in samsara, we have the perfect foil for our strong egos. No matter how good an opinion, no matter how bad an opinion we have of ourselves, samsara, by its own reality functions, will take it away from us and force us to face reality as it is, and ourselves as we are. Samsara is like a stepping stone for us to find our way to freedom with a tamed and helpful ally, which is ourself. That may sound dreary to you, but there's another way to look at all this. Since we all come in with basically nothing, and we leave with basically nothing, what point is there for us to live wholeheartedly? Well, in spite of the suffering of samsara, our own mental world, we touch on the realities of uncountable others also in samsara, struggling as we are. Our world is only us, but our touch is inexpressible, indescribable, and reaches far. So many others we can touch and leave with them what good things we have learned. We can't take our flowers of effort and goodwill with us in the end, but we can give them to others to give them strength and courage to continue. We've received in our lives uncountable flowers of the hard work of others, and we can do the same in return to help. We touch and encourage realms we can't see, but they're as far-reaching as mind and heart can reach. If we make it to the end of our lives intact, warm mind and heart, we will bloom in spite of ourselves into unseen but felt magnificence of Buddha nature, and pass on courage to others to continue with it. We can't take suffering out of the world, no matter how hard or often we try, but we can soften the blows of misfortune and heartache for others, and encourage the will to live to the end without giving in to adversity. We can encourage others to wake up and look around. We can spend our lives waking up and reaching warm hand to warm hand. We can love every minute of our lives by truly loving ourselves as we are, in every place, in every detail we look upon, because it's us. And then everything we touch, warm hand to warm hand, will continue spreading like roots everywhere. But in all the details of our lives, the living and the dead, the withering on the vine, the vile and depraved, we can look on all of it with compassion and accept that nothing noble or beautiful has ever existed in a vacuum, but must have the dirt and garbage that nurtures the flowering and the bright and does resonate in the dark as well. So if you would express joy in your life, love every withering petal, all the dark and moist earth loaded with living and decaying life, the hurt, the injustice to innocents and guilty alike, love it with equanimity. Understand that we all stand in the middle of greed, hate, and delusion with equal touch on all of it, but also we sit with benevolence, compassion, and equanimity in the same mix. It's our choice. If you want to find your way to the end of life intact, learn to touch all of it equally without being lost in any of it. Then you can help others and touch their worlds without harming them or you, and you can walk freely among your own flowers without destroying them. Thank you. I'm sorry, that was a bit long today, but I couldn't seem to say it anyway other than that. So you probably, I don't know if you can even remember it, but to ask questions about. But if you can, please do. Yes, Mike.
I know this may be incorrect, but I got from your talk that the joy we would get is from viewing samsara as a test. Not, somebody saying, okay, you pass or you don't pass, but it is a challenge for us to learn how to adjust our perception of the world and avoid making judgments and all this other stuff. And that the joy is realizing that it is a test, and no test is serious. It's like you go to school and you take a math test. Well, you fail math, you're not going to drop dead because of it. We look at samsara as a test. It challenges us, and it's a lifelong test. Is that anywhere close to what you may have been implying?
I think that's close to it. I would say my point was that we are samsara, and that's why no one is free of it, because it's our perception of the world looking through a very closed and enclosed type of thinking. We don't see the big picture because we're looking at it without understanding what we're looking at. So in the beginning, especially, we create a lot of trouble, with our thinking. But we're also big mind. We're also a great being inside, and we create with everything. But occasionally we create with fear, anger, and whenever our emotions get out of check, we create even more. And the stronger the emotion, we create strong. So as long as we are held by our ego or ourself in a kind of gridlock, we can't create a world that is easy to live in. So one of the ways that we have to deal with samsara is to recognize that it's us, and therefore self-mastering is the way out. And this is part of the Four Noble Truths that Shakyamuni Buddha spoke of. And his way out was to follow the Eightfold Path, which at some point we'll talk about again. But it's learning how to master your life in pieces all the time, and knowing that it's all coming from you. And the samsara you live in, the world of suffering, is your character asking to be mastered. And it's all there for you to look at and see, and all the good parts are also there for you to see. It's like you can't get negative attitudes about it, because everything good in this world is also you.
That's part of the relative view that we have that creates the samsara, because everything we see is because we're looking at it and we're interacting with it and we're perceiving it. So it is our samsara because of what we do with what we see and encounter.
Yes, and every day we recreate it all the time. Every time you have a negative emotion, a heavy negative emotion, you're creating the world around you at that point. And you're going to face it. You're going to have to walk through it and live it. But it's not terrible, because in the end, whether you succeed or don't succeed is not important. It's whether you keep working yourself so that you don't dry up and give in. If that makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
It's like having to work on say you're lifting weights, and if you work 1 week and say, oh, the next week I'm going to take off, nothing would ever happen or change. So it's knowing that if you want a great body, you just have to keep at it. You have to keep doing it. And it's like in samsara, we're always up against ourselves. It's nobody else. So you can't blame another person, and you can't ask another person to respond as you respond. You have to deal with it 100% wholeheartedly as yourself and master yourself in the process. But again, whether you do or don't isn't the point. The point is your struggle, your personal struggle, that makes the difference. So at the end of our lives, we want to look at ourselves. We can't look back at past history and say, well, I did this good and that good and this good. You can only look at the present and say, well, this is me now. This is what I've done with myself. So it's important not to get caught up in ideas of yourself, but just as you are now.
Keep striving.
Oh, Arvin? Yeah, right. Keep striving. Oh, I'm sorry. Where's your foot?
It was over there.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Jane. That was a beautiful talk. You know, when I listen to you, it feels like a little brook going over pebbles and rocks, and just going around and meandering and going into the next meadow. It's just a wonderful feeling. You talked so much. You brought so much into this thing, right? You talk about joy is connecting to everything and living living in our real and complete body, and on into everything fixed will unfix in time, which is very cheerful. And
the nature of samsara is that nothing is going to be permanent, and everybody, as long as we're human and keep getting into negative thinking,
right. And then you ended with the notion of loving it all with equanimity, and I'm curious how it all comes down to what you started with, and you said you were going to talk about space, details, and joy. And can you talk about what about this talk of yours is about the details of practice?
Yes, the details are us. And if I were to summarize the talk today, I would say I spoke earlier about space, details, and joy, and the relationship that space and details have to creating joy. And joy, this time I was emphasizing details because the details of our life are what we are, that we're all of this. And when we look at this world, if we really want to understand ourselves, we have to study not just our internal thinking, but the world around us. We have to really come to grips with it and learn that it is us. And by learning that, we become very calm in the looking of it because we stop trying to find a villain, and we're content. Okay, we look at this world and we say things don't work right, but we at the same time it's us, and therefore I can change it by changing myself. And if you want to even try it sometime, get into an argument with somebody that is really quite angry, and you're angry too, and deliberately stop yourself in the middle of it and step back from it and change your tactic just like that and watch everything change with you. I mean, that happens all the time. And what I'm trying to say is that the world we live in is a self-made world, and we're in control of it, even though it doesn't look like it. It looks like we're being swept along with the tide, but it's not true. We're actually creating it with thoughts and feelings and speech and the things we do. And so all we have to do is start to look at it with a more dispassionate point of view and start to drop off things and watch what happens in the world. So if we want to really live with joy in our lives, which we already have if we just look at it, is to first pay attention to the world, not always just follow ourselves, which is a very self-conscious way to do things, but just look at the world around. And being mindful is more than just treating things with respect. It's literally learning to love yourself. It's literally learning to treat yourself with respect. And all the things you don't like, look inside, because those are the things you don't like about yourself. And if you're really happy with something, understand that that's also yourself. And so literally see through your small self to recognize and embrace your big self, which is everything else. That was the point. Does that make sense, or was that too convoluted?
No, it's very abstract. So how do I, if someone is like acting, in a like they really obnoxiously, how do I practice, being or letting that be, or, in what you just said, because it seems like the reactive mind is very easy to come up and act out. So in practice, how would you do it?
That's what I was just saying, is that you would spend time in observing and paying attention to what you're doing and get out of your head, because that's where all the trouble starts. And if you can just get out of your head enough to really just pay attention to what you're doing in one thing or another and take care of all of that one thing or another that you're doing with, then you can have some feeling of, okay, you're taking care of yourself. And taking care of yourself is one of the quick ways to calm your body down.
I
And
think I'm getting it. I think that you can't be like this in a moment when you're confronted with a problem. You have to be like this all the time.
well, you don't have to be like it all the time. I doubt anybody could be, but at least be making the effort to be like that all the time.
Yeah.
This,
Okay.
you don't have to have everything just right. You can't fix everything. You can't do everything right, and we'll probably bungle right to the end. But still, the effort you make changes everything inside.
Thank you.
That's why Japanese made such a big deal about doing everything wholeheartedly, because it really does make a difference in your internal body and mind when you put everything on the line, when you don't hold back anything. The hardest thing to do is that. Sandy. Sandy?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. When I listened to your talk, I started, what it brought up for me was we get angry, we get sad, we get morose, we get all these emotions, and that are not conducive to being happy or content. But it seems the longer you practice, the more you realize that you actually have a choice. At least that's the way I see it, that I have a choice in how I'm going to react. I don't have to get angry. I don't have to yell back. I don't have to sit here and be sad. I can get up and do something I enjoy. So it's a lot of it, to me, from what you're saying, is that you have to be aware in the now, that they're almost like there's triggers that happen, that you start to see. You're going to react poorly. You're going to be angry. You feel these things starting inside of you. But I think the longer you practice, you're able to step back and not get grabbed into it initially, and to see what's happening, why your feelings are changing, why you're feeling sad, and to be able to look at them and to know that, you have a choice, that you don't have to make this feeling your whole life at that moment and let it affect you to the point where you become either too angry, too overreactive to others, or even what you could do to yourself by sitting and being unhappy and morose, and letting it affect you that way. So I think one of the things I had read years and years ago was a book by Pema Chodron, that she brought this up, and she said that, as you practice, you develop an awareness of yourself, of what's going on inside of you, and you recognize it. where in the past it's become, just an ordinary reaction. It no longer has to be that one, you just react. You can take a look at what's going on. And I mean, you can still get caught up in it, but at least you know initially that if you're aware and you're in the now, that you can actually take a look at what's happening. But I think it takes a lot of practice to get to full awareness that you can see it right away, and but I don't know. That's my little 2 cents.
Thank you, Sandy. Yeah, it's important to just keep paying attention, but there's more to just paying attention. It's learning about yourself by all the details around you that surround you, because that's who you are also.
Right.
It's like trying to get out of your small self or your head by paying attention.
Mhm.
And the more you do that, the more you start noticing things like stepping back from arguments and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that by watching yourself, and becoming aware of what's going on inside of you, that you learn about yourself.
Yeah.
You learn, how much you're driven by these. What you always thought of was just yourself. This just the way life is. Somebody says something nasty to me, I'm going to give them the finger, or I'm going to react to it. And it doesn't have to be that way. It's like
the other way you can do is when you see that, you think, where did that come from?
Yeah. And also it's like, it's part of you, but it just erupts, and you just don't seem to have control over it. But then you learn that all you have to do is be aware.
And you are in control of it. You are.
Right. Then you see it, and you can see it happening.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that you can control the big acts that are moving in your life, but it means that you can control, as you know, how you respond to it and how you learn from it. And by taking yourself out of your head and focusing on those details all around you, you have, like, your work or whatever it is you're doing, then you have a lot. Even if it's paying attention to a person who's very angry at you and observing rather than immediately responding with emotion is another way to just get out of your head and see what's going on.
And I've found over time that, I used to really grab on to arguments and things like that, or anger with other people. And now it's like, I don't want to be in a state of anger. I just want, I want to exist peacefully as much as I can.
Yeah.
And that's the state I like to be in.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
good. Thank you, Sandy.
You're welcome.
Daniel.
Great pep talk, Coach. To Arvin's point, the sort of practical details, as a teammate here, as one of the teammates here at the halftime, one of the things that I've encountered is the Theravadan using essentially coming back to the breath on a purely grounding foundational level, and the joy. I mean, one of the things that in the Theravadan YouTube things that I found is using the breath, using the prajna paramita, using the breath to essentially find the joy in the breath on a very foundational level, and using and building on that, essentially finding in even just a simple inhalation and exhalation, finding the joy in that, and then that's sending that to various parts of the body. And that That's a very practical way, and it's very non-abstract. It's very somatic and very physical and very in the moment. So that's what I would that's what I would pass on to one of the teammates here at halftime.
Thank you, Daniel. That's actually a good point. Breath is a very good way to bring yourself back into the present. But my point was that paying attention to the details of your life is not an abstraction. It's a practical way to ground yourself when you want to fly off anywhere. It's a grounding activity, which is to get out of your head and stop thinking and start paying attention to anything that's around you, so that you don't have to argue with anybody, or even if you're in an argument with somebody, you can use that time to study them while you're arguing with them, and not just react, but to learn skillful means. So I don't think of that as being only abstraction. I think of that as being a very practical way of using yourself to learn and grow, rather than to be caught by the circumstances that our own thinking did.
I would agree with you if I didn't feel at a fundamental level there's just so much conditioning to overcome, and so many distractions to the attention and maintaining focus and things like that. So I mean, I think to your point, I mean, it makes sense. It sort of, it just gets very ethical, it just gets into very Buddhist ethics.
But it's forgetting the terms, forgetting the words, forgetting even the Buddhism. When you talk and work with people, you can spend your time in conditioning and ideas of conditioning and your past history, or personal history of any kind, or you can just start right from the present, right this moment, and deal with it is as if this moment is it, and all you have to do is this block, this block, this block. All of this is part of the world around you, and you can solve what's around you as well. And you can solve what's around you by simple things like sweeping the floor. And that's what I mean. It means get out of your head, get into the real world, which is you, your bigger self, and just deal with your world in whatever way calms you. And if sleeping calms you, sleep. If breathing calms you, breathe. If walking outside calms you, walk outside. In other words, take a practical physical term to change things. Don't just spend time in thinking about conditioning and things like that, because that is pure abstraction. But we act as if it's reality, but it's still abstraction, because it's a history that exists only in your mind and you're thinking of it. And when you don't think of it, you're not subject to it anymore. You're only subject to it because you give it credence and because you believe in it so strongly.
Thanks, Coach. We're going to go out and play the best darn game we possibly can.
I hope so, Daniel. Mark?
Hi. Great talk. Didn't go on too long. It went on just long enough.
Oh, it was, I usually make 2.5 pages, and this time it was 3.5. Sorry.
Oh, it's a good extra 3 pages. Good extra. Okay. You said something earlier on, and I just want to come back to it. Maybe you could clarify it or go in depth in it, because it seemed to ring with me. And that was to find joy. Joy comes in when we remove things from us.
The absence of things rather than.
Absence of things from inside of us. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's like we're too busy thinking we have joy, we experience it all the time. And when you may have a very small feeling of it now and then, when something goes very well and you're calm and quiet, and you feel some extremely quiet, peaceful feeling that is radiant rather than effervescent like happiness is. And so when you feel that kind of feeling, you have that joy, you're just aware that it's always there. So, but most of the time we're too busy thinking, feeling, emoting, or whatever. And if we just calmed ourselves down, even just in sitting, you could experience it. You could see it. The minute you calm your mind and stop like raging with it and just start paying attention to your body, breathing, like Daniel was suggesting, any kind of breathing like that would bring it up, would awaken you to it. And then you'd realize, well, it's actually always there.
So it's not like I have to constantly pursue happiness to find joy. That's what you're saying to me.
Yes, absolutely. Happiness is nothing to pursue, really. It's a very effervescent, short-lived pleasure of the emotions. Joy is not a pleasure in that sense. Joy is a pervasive sense of grounding in your whole being that makes you feel, I don't know, I would say uplifting, but that seems like a weak word. But that way, it gives you a radiant feeling inside when you feel wonderfully good. And everybody can do that. Everybody feels it. You can see it in the faces of some people, like when somebody says to a woman, say, who is pregnant and very happy, and a person says, "You're absolutely glowing." That's what they're seeing in that person. And it's in everybody, and it's always there. It's like our grounding, our basic grounding, but it's the grounding that connects us to everything. It connects us as a whole one being. So happiness is just like a superficial surface emotion of a self. That's how I see it.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it sounds like we should get the Bill of Rights amended in that place. Where it says the pursuit of happiness. We might be actually happier if we did that. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to hear that.
I think we don't need to pursue happiness. We just need to pursue calmness and equanimity towards the whole world and equanimity towards everything in the world. And when we do that, it grounds us to the point where we can feel our real nature, which is a joyful nature, not a sad or heavy or dark. It's just the opposite.
Well, then I wager that to feel this joy, to make room in there, as soon as you make room for it, there's always some type of dharma thing happening. Some, let's say another being or something, a sentient being comes and it starts stirring the pot. And I think it's a test, isn't it? Because I find that every time I have those tests and I can fall back into my breathing and can not react, it seems like it ensures, and it's a kind of a training that helps you just deflect whatever, let's say, small little hooks are thrown out at you to catch you and pull you out of your joyness.
But the thing is that the hooks that are thrown out, we throw out. We're doing it.
Well, we've made the edges for them to at least catch on to, right?
Yeah, probably. I think our mind is very clever, and we have a very defensive kind of makeup, so that we don't want to get out of the comfort zone, and we don't want to get out of the small enclosed space, because it's the devil we know rather than the devil we don't know. But actually getting into the big space, which is like paying attention to everything around us, is far more freeing and enjoyable. And we feel much looser, happier, joyful, whatever. But the real thing is finding what our real ground is what our practice is. And that ground is a joyful state, not a negative state.
Thank you.
Joanne next, and then Sandy.
Oh,
Do you have your thing still up?
I don't know.
Okay, then anyway, Joanne.
Okay, so I am sitting here questioning the idea, in this tough time that we have, that there's something to overcome or solve, like, because And also, I think it has to do with like, if we're playing this game, then sometimes you embrace the fact that you're the quarterback, and sometimes you embrace the fact that you're, like, I'm sorry, I don't know football very well, but you know, you're the one who's like, tackling the guy so that your quarterback makes it, right?
Yeah.
But if you, it's really weird. I've been listening to a book on neuroscience and meditation and metaphysical. So
Okay.
if 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 you look at something like, this is something I have to struggle through, overcome, or whatever, it puts you in a place of opposition to it, almost, instead of an
Opposition to what?
opposition to the fact that you're just struggling. Big deal. Like,
Yeah.
okay, right? Because if I say, well, I'm, I had this injury and it's making it hard for me to run across the field, and if I'm saying, well, I don't want that injury, well, it doesn't change the fact that you've got the injury and you still have to run across the field.
Yeah. So what is the question there?
Huh? Pardon?
What is the question there? I think we missed something you just said.
Oh, well, it's not a question. Well, okay. Well, I'm questioning whether, like, if you see it as something that, like, it's an obstacle that I'm angry, or it's an obstacle that such and such happened. Well, you automatically are framing it as something that you don't want. You know, you have a perspective on it in that moment, instead of just like being with the fact that you're angry and allowing the grace to be angry. And when you have a perspective that it's something that you have to overcome or push away, are you really able to like pivot in that moment, like you talked about, where you can step back and just shift and, have a different outcome, maybe?
I think what you're saying is that you think that we have to push away anger and things like that. I'm not saying that.
No, that's exactly not what I'm saying.
Oh, all
I'm
right.
saying the idea that we have, that we need to push it away or need to overcome it, is exactly the opposite. Like, it's the opposite of being present.
Yeah, I agree. That's not what my point is. My point is that when you observe that a particular behavior you have, whether it's anger or whatever, is constantly stopping things for you, and you're getting bad reactions from it, and you're never having a successful end of it in the sense of putting the argument to rest, then you can change tactics.
Yeah.
And find what works. And in other words, you're not limited to one particular behavior. You can take any behavior you want, but whatever works in this case is what I'm saying. Is
Yeah.
we feel kind of bound in a rigid way to actions and behavior, and thinking that we have to do certain things and be certain ways, and nothing is that way. Nothing in this whole world is that way. Everything is you as you are, figuring out what works best for you.
Mhm.
Everybody's world is that way. If you feel like you have to be good, or you have to be bad, or you have to be busy, or you have to be something, then that's what the problem is. It doesn't
Right.
matter what you do, as long as you're sincere and wholeheartedly trying to help others in some way without messing up other people's lives. And if you don't even want to do that, but you just want to roll in the sun, that's fine too, as long as it's really what you want.
Yeah, I was more kind of reacting to what Daniel was saying about like overcoming, and because that is maybe in itself limiting.
It can be limiting, yes. But if your intent is to overcome your ego, that's just a basic deep push you have or motivation to practice. And
Yeah.
all of this is something that you eventually drop, because when you do drop it and you find that when you're living in a world and that world is your making and the world keeps going the way you'd like it or don't like it, you don't have to keep pursuing the same way. You can experiment in your life and try to find what works. So if one way doesn't work, then try another way. And if arguing with somebody has a good effect, then argue with them. If it doesn't have a good effect, then figure out what works better. That's what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Everyone has that ability to just take a good look at their life. Nothing needs to be pushed away. Nothing needs to be gotten rid of. Just take care of your life in the way that makes you feel when you get to the end of your life, you're not going to be sorry you behaved a certain way.
Mhm. Gotcha.
Yeah. Just hang on to your life in a way that makes you feel glad about living. That was my point.